New intro. Who is she? Hi, guys. Welcome to True Crime Wine Wednesday. If you are new here, hi, hello, welcome. I am Sherilyn, and I am so glad you found me. If you're not new here, welcome back. Thank you for coming to hang out with me every single Wednesday. You guys are da bomb, baby. I just love you all so much. Couple things I wanted to just quickly bring up before I get into everything. I'm going to try to keep it nice and brief for you. First thing, I'm sorry I missed you guys last week. I know that I had a post saying that I would see you guys on Friday and we were going to discuss the Gabby Petito case, but it just wasn't feeling right to me. I feel like there's so much that's unfolding still, and there's a few channels that are already doing it for you guys. So I figured, you know what, I want to just hold off. I don't know if it's something that I'll want to do in the future once we have more information and I can just kind of do it all in one. You guys know I love to just like get as much facts as we can out there. And right now, everything's just kind of up in the air and I'm feeling like sometimes I can just kind of get carried away. So I just felt like it was best for me to hold off. I did see that Stephanie Harlow has posted something about it. She is just phenomenal at deep dives. If you are wanting to watch something, I would definitely recommend handing over to her channel and checking it out. I haven't had a chance to personally, but just based on everything that she does, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that she's probably done a great job at it. Second matter of business. This is not my new background. We are not in Mexico. We were supposed to be in Mexico, I think 2 weeks ago now, a week and a half ago. Yeah, a little bit of craziness unfolded less than 24 hours before we were supposed to leave. So we are now leaving on Thursday. Fingers crossed. I will keep you guys posted. And then once we get all settled and everything like that, I'll let you guys know what went on. I was thinking maybe I'd do like an Instagram live or something, hang out with you guys when we get there, give you like a little tour and then talk about it there. I don't know. You guys let me know what you think. All right. With all that being said, today's case consumed me all weekend. I was feeling really like deflated. I think like there's just like a culmination of things. And then I go on Netflix and I see there's a new special. So naturally I had to watch it. And oh my gosh, it's a 4-part series behind like the inspiration of the movie Split. I didn't even know there was an inspiration for the movie Split, but here we are. There's also like so much more to it, I think, that we haven't even like scratched the surface of. And my thoughts are like, I really would love to gather up like Keith Morrison or like Josh Mankiewicz or something like that and just like get further into this. But for now, I'm going to share everything that we know thus far. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot our riddle. Okay, today's riddle is, I was carried into... How about you learn how to talk first before you deliver the riddle, Sherilyn? Let's try this again. I was carried into a dark room and set on fire. I wept, and then my head was cut off. What am I? Today we are talking about Billy Milligan. His story was hugely publicized in the 70s, and that's because he was found not guilty of 3 counts of rape, armed robbery, by reasons of insanity because he claimed that he had 10 different personalities in his head, and it was one of them that committed the crimes. Therefore, he had no recollection of it and couldn't be held responsible. After I watched this, it led me down like this huge path where I needed to learn as much as I could about DID, which is dissociative identity disorder. I started when I came across a video that Anthony Padilla has out there, and he interviewed individuals with DID, and then from there I went to one of their YouTube channels, watched all of her like live streams. It was just like fascinating, and I highly recommend checking them out. I will leave a link in the description below. And part of the reason why I just wanted to mention that is I don't want for today's case to paint a picture that if somebody has DID, they should be feared. I learned so much from her channel and a lot of the misconceptions about DID. So like I said, definitely check it out, and just know going in this that my intention is to not have anybody fearful of somebody who has DID. Before learning about this case, I knew what DID was. I'd actually like to say I knew of DID. I really didn't have like a handle on it. And I had no idea that an estimated 1 to 3% of the population has DID. Even though it's starting to get talked about a little bit more these days. There's still a lot of work to do. I don't even know how many times I've said that on this channel when it comes to anything mental health related, but specifically for DID, I still feel like there is some misconceptions out there. There are even medical professionals that I was reading reports on who call it a hoax. Like they don't believe it. And a lot of, individuals themselves don't believe it. So back in the 70s, when it really wasn't talked about, this case was extremely controversial. It all started in Ohio in October of 1977 when 3 women were raped in the Ohio State campus area in the matter of 12 days. The first attack was on October 14th, 1977. The victim was an optometry student, and she said her attacker pointed a gun at her, took her from the campus parking lot between 7 and 8 a.m. They took her to a wooded area and assaulted her. She said when it was over, her assailant made her write out checks and then cash them for him. The second attack was on October 22nd. This was a nursing student, and her version is almost identical as the first. Only 4 days after that, on October 26th, a third victim is attacked. All of their descriptions of their assailant seem to match and lead investigators to believe that this was just one single person doing this. He was described as a white male between 23 to 27 years old, somewhere between 175 to 185 pounds. He had brownish hair, and he was wearing like a brown jogger with jeans and white sneakers on 2 of the assaults. So he wore the same outfit 2 times. What was interesting was the first victim said that she noticed that her attacker had a drifting in his eyes that would go side to side. And because she was an optometry student, it was something that she took note of. And she thought this person had a condition called nystagmus?
Nystagmus.
Oh, I did pretty good. Nystagmus. Thank you. So she wanted to make sure that the investigators noted that on the report, because whoever they were going to be looking for might have this certain marker that they can focus on. What she went through was really terrifying. I can't imagine what would go on in your head in these situations. She said that she was handcuffed to her own car. He drove her to a wooded area where he proceeded to attack her. After the attack, he tells her that he's going to let her go, but makes her promise that if she's going to go to the police, that she give a description of somebody completely different. And he said that if he finds out that she didn't do that, he would send people after her that would kill her. And just to make her even more fearful, he took her address book and started writing down the names and addresses of her family and friends that she cared about, just to make sure, as if she wasn't, already scared enough, now she's got to worry about people that she cares about and this person coming after them. The second victim had a very similar story. She was also taken at gunpoint. She said that her attacker was very abrupt. He had quite the potty mouth, and he said that his name was Phil. This individual also took her address book and wrote down names of her family members and said that if she said anything, there was a brotherhood that he was a part of that would come after her and kill her. The third victim said she was kidnapped behind her apartment. She had just gotten home and she was parking her boyfriend's car, and as she got out, somebody came up behind her, pointed a gun at her, and instructed her to go back in the car. He then told her to drive to an isolated area. When they got there, she was also assaulted. And then after her attack, she was instructed to drive back to town, go to the bank, write some checks, and cash them and give them to the assailant. The whole thing is maddening, but that aspect of it just really grinds my gears. As if you haven't done enough. I'm just gonna need you to cash some checks for me too, okay? So this is naturally a big thing on the news. All of the female students in the university area are terrified. It's just one attack after another in such a short amount of time. And it's clear that it's them that are being targeted. They were so scared that campuses even organized an escort to walk female students to and from their classes, also to their dorm rooms or to their cars at the end of the day. The local news was even reporting on it, warning all of the students to just take precaution, walking groups groups together, and they were calling this individual the campus rapist. Luckily, in this case, it didn't take long for investigators to find out who was responsible. They dusted the third victim's vehicle, and they were able to retrieve 3 partial prints that they said were going to be usable. And then on October 27th, the day after the last attack, a victim picked out a 22-year-old man out of a series of mugshots, and this guy's name was Billy Milligan. He was in the system because he had been convicted of rape before, and he had also just gotten out of prison that year for a robbery charge. So because he already had a record, he had his fingerprints on file, and sure enough, it matched one of the fingerprints that was in the third victim's vehicle. So they go to his house with a search warrant, and from the get-go, it is a spectacle. At first, he answers the door and he denies that he's Billy Milligan. He doesn't know who that is. Things get pretty heated. The police are like, yeah, you are Billy Milligan. Like, this is you. What are you trying to do? They get the handcuffs on him, and he keeps asking, have I hurt anybody? Basically, the police just keep saying, like, you know exactly what you've done. They're looking through the apartment just to see if there is anything further, like right there before they take him in, that can, you know, further add to their case. And as they're looking through drawers, Billy's like, be careful, don't set the bomb off. So a bomb threat is called in, whole squad comes out, evacuate the apartment building, and it turns out it was a fake bomb. So they take Billy to the station, they finish up their search in the apartment, and sure enough, they are able to find a few more items that further prove they feel like Billy's the one who's responsible for these attacks, because he had possessions of these women in his apartment. I believe he had one of their IDs, also some papers from some mail that was in one of the vehicles. And then among the laundry, they find the brown jacket that he repeatedly wore for these attacks. He's arrested right then and there, and he was described as almost fearful while he was arrested. He was very like submissive and cooperative, but at the jail, he's described as very confused and scared. He just kept asking if he hurt anybody and that he couldn't understand why he was in trouble. And then when the police are like, yeah, you know exactly what you did. You assaulted these women. You held them at gunpoint. You threatened to kill them if they told anybody. His demeanor was almost like beside himself. He couldn't process and understand because he said he didn't know what they were talking about. Not too long after being in the jail, a psychologist was called because Billy attempted to take his life. He ripped off the toilet in his cell, and then he was using the porcelain pieces to try to harm himself. A psychologist is brought in, and he is given a Rorschach test. Rorschach? I guess she's an expert in this, and she describes like her reaction is like almost dumbfounded because she had never seen results like Billy's. She said it went from almost genius level to borderline mentally handicapped, and the test itself was unusable. So they run an EEG, and this scan shows the brain of a child. And they're like, okay, well, either the machine is malfunctioning or his brain is changing at different times. He also started drawing in his cell around this time as an outlet, and the drawings just like added to the confusion. Some of them were like out of this world art that needed to be in a museum. And then next it looked like a 3-year-old had drawn it, like basically like stickmen and just like very juvenile. Even the style was really different. You know, usually artists have a niche or like a style that they gravitate to and that they're really good at, whether it be like, you know, realism or like pop art, cartoon, anime. Like it's always just like something that they're really, really good at. And a lot of these drawings were in so many different genres and like very well drawn in each genre. Like it looked like different people were drawing them. It's really quite incredible to see. So the decision is made between all of the doctors that they want to have him like sit down and actually studied, I guess. So it's all coordinated for him to sit in this room with a few medical professionals. And pretty soon they notice while he is in like mid-conversation, his eyes would kind of like roll or like shift back and forth like the one victim had mentioned. And it almost looked like he would kind of like wake up or like just come to. He appeared to be in a state of confusion, and then like his posture would change and like his mannerisms would be different. Sometimes he would talk in an accent or just like somebody completely different. And as they're asking questions, they realize they're speaking to different people. Like I said, this was in the 70s. This isn't something that was common or that anybody was really prepared for. But the doctors were quite convinced that he had DID. And so they share their findings with Billy's lawyers and the judge. And they said that just at this moment in time, they didn't believe that he was fit for trial, partially because he didn't understand the charges that were laid against him because he didn't remember them, but also because he couldn't help the defense to best prepare them to defend him and like give him a good chance at like a fair trial. So the judge agrees and he appoints a doctor named Dr. Harding who ran a mental health facility to kind of like oversee Billy's care. He basically goes through like a Rolodex of personalities.
I control the spot completely. I say who is on and who is off. Did not commit crime of sexual misconduct.
How old are you?
14,
How old is Alan?
18. I don't remember a whole lot. They just don't understand what love is.
Understandably, they aren't sure if this is legit. They don't know if he's acting and just trying to like line up the possibility of having an insanity defense. So more specialists are brought in, and the doctor that actually treated Sybil, who I didn't even realize Sybil was a real person. I knew of the movie because my mom has made several references of it because Oriana has a knack for like being a bunch of different little characters. So my mom will call her Sybil sometimes. But yeah, I learned Sybil was a real girl. So allegedly this doctor worked with Sybil and was able to integrate her 16 personalities into one. So this was kind of her goal, but primarily what she wanted to do was make sure that for trial purposes, Billy was going to be able to understand what was right and what was wrong and what the crimes that he was being accused of were. I know there's a lot going on here, you guys. Since she was an expert, they also wanted to see what her opinion was on Billy himself and to see if he was faking it. So she said within 20 minutes, she knew that he had DID. And it was because in that amount of time, she had already spoken to 3 of his personalities. I actually think they're referred to as alters. I think that's like the preferred term. So we'll stick with alters. Hearing her speak about the whole process, it does sound really terrifying for somebody who I guess would be like the main, like Billy, for instance, because there's a long period in your life where you don't understand what's going on. So you'll have like these lapses in time, I guess like amnesia almost, or you'll be like sitting watching a show. All of a sudden you realize like the show is done. You're like in a different, you could be in like a different room, or you're like 2 hours into like something else and you're just like, what happened? Like, so like constant state of confusion. There is so much to DID, but basically, like just in a nutshell from what I learned from this special and then just watching Nin's channel on it, it's described that we all have different personality traits, but with DID, these different traits have split out and become different entities. In Billy's case, he started with 10, and as treatment had gone on over the years, it came about that he had 24. I've got some notes on like the 10 main ones for you guys, just because I want to give you a little bit of like context of just how different these alters are. So the first one was Billy. He's referred to as the original, the core personality. The second was an individual named Arthur, who was 22. He was the Englishman. He was rational and emotionless. He speaks with a British accent. He was self-taught in physics, chemistry, and liked to study medical books. Allegedly, he reads and writes fluent Arabic. He was the first to discover the existence of all the others. The third was Reagan. He's 23. He was the keeper of hate. He was very aggressive. He's Yugoslavian. He speaks English, but with a very noticeable Slavic accent. He reads, writes, and speaks Serbo-Croatian. He's a karate expert, displays extraordinary strength. His charge was to be the protector of the family and of the women and the children. He is associated with criminals and drug addicts and admits to criminal, sometimes violent behavior. Number 4, Alan. He's 18. He's known as the con man. He's a manipulator, and he is the one who often deals with outsiders. He plays the drums. He likes to paint portraits, and he's the only one of the personalities who smokes cigarettes. Number 5 was Tommy. He's 16. He was the escape artist. He plays a saxophone and he's an electronics specialist and a painter of landscapes. Number 6 was Danny, who was 14, and he was known as the frightened one. He was afraid of people, especially men. Number 7 was David, who was 8 years old, and he was known as the keeper of pain. He was very empathetic. He was the one who would absorb all of the hurt and suffering of the other personalities. Number 8 was a little girl named Christine, who was 3 years old. She's described as a bright little English girl. She can read and paint. She has dyslexia. She likes to draw and color pictures of flowers and butterflies. Number 9 is Christopher, who is 13 years old and is Christine's brother, who also has a British accent. He's obedient but troubled. And then number 10 was Adelina, who's 19 years old. She was described as shy, lonely. She's a lesbian who writes poetry, cooks, and keeps the house for the others. And one of her physical traits is that her eyes occasionally drift from side to side with nystagmus. So those were the main ones. There were an additional 14 that were discovered later, and it was found that Arthur, who was one of like the main alters, had suppressed them and would not allow them to come forward. He looked at them as the undesirables. I'll leave a clip of all of their personalities here, so you guys can just pause the video if you want to read into them a little bit more. I was really curious about them, so I'm sure there will be a few of you guys as well. But those 10 were the main ones that would come forward in sessions. So for those who knew him, the doctors are like, is this legit? Like, how didn't you know this? And they're just like, okay. A lot is starting to click for us right now. Like, they didn't know what it was, but they get like goosebumps because they're like, okay, we thought this was Billy being Billy. We thought he had a knack for accents. We thought he liked to like entertain us and make us laugh, and how in the middle of a conversation, he would just switch to like one of his characters, and everyone just kind of like got a kick out of it. And they never considered the fact that these were different alters coming forward. His mom said that she wasn't aware that there was a term for it, but there was something that always told her that she knew there were multiple Billies. She knew that there was sweet, wonderful Billy who was like her son, and then there would be one that would give her trouble, and she'd say to herself, like, that's not Billy. I guess when he was 14, he did go to a hospital to have some tests run, and the doctor stated in the report that he did show signs of amnesia here and there, but nothing was ever diagnosed as DID. Once he was finally diagnosed, the next step is to try to figure out where it stemmed from, because oftentimes with DID, it comes about because of severe trauma that happens, particularly in somebody's childhood. According to Billy and his siblings, their childhood was definitely less than ideal. Billy was born to a woman named Dorothy Sands. She was a beautiful aspiring performer. She had moved from Ohio to Miami to try to make it as a star. When she got there, she met a pretty well-known comedian named Johnny Morrison. He was married at the time, and they carried out an affair, and she got pregnant with her first son, a little boy named Jim, who was born in 1953, and then in 1955, on February 14th, Billy was born. His mom said one of the first traumatic things that happened to Billy happened very, very young in his age. He was only a couple months old, but he was rushed to the emergency room because he just stopped breathing. It actually was at the point where the nurses were like, there's nothing we can do for him. And his mom was like, no, like, this isn't it. Like, make him wake up. And they were able to revive him. The following year, on December 31st, 1956, his sister Kathy was born. Their father is described as a gambler who liked to drink quite a bit. He was known to use drugs occasionally, and he was very insecure and jealous about Dorothy and how beautiful she was. I guess if she spoke to other men, he would lose it, and a few times got violent, which the kids were witness to. After one of these outbursts from him, she kicked him out of the house, and he went to go and stay at a hotel. That evening, he took his life. From what I know, the kids don't really remember him him at all. They were just toddlers when he died. And so after his death, the family moves back to Ohio to a place called Amanda, and their mom briefly remarries a gentleman that she had actually married prior to her meeting their dad, but it doesn't work out again and they get re-divorced. And then not too long after that, she meets a man named Chalmers. He's a single father with a daughter that is the same age as Billy's older brother, and they become the Milligans. Dorothy and Chalmers adopted each other's children. They became like Brady Bunch in their minds, and I guess at the beginning it was very ideal. He was described as very nice, very caring. He loved the kids, treated them like his own, but then like a light switch, he just turns. He starts by becoming very abusive towards Dorothy. One time he even brutally assaulted her in front of the kids after he learned that she spoke to a male co-worker at her job. From there, just like each time was worse than the last. Billy's mom said that she knew that anytime he would pull out a drink, it wasn't like a matter of if, but when things were going to turn violent for her. And then Billy's brother said it just got worse and worse from there. The abuse started happening to the boys, but he said it was done in private. He said that Chalmers would bring them out to the shed that they had in the backyard and bring like a phone book and then hit them through the phone book so that there was never any marks or bruising or anything like that. But obviously, like, you're still like feeling these like blows. After, he would tell them, you know, if you say anything, I'll harm your mother more and I'm going to start to harm your sister. So they just kept it quiet to themselves. I guess that although Billy's older brother also experienced abuse, Billy was the main target. David, who is one of the alters, the 9-year-old, is the one who recalls all of the abuse. So anytime that abuse was remembered during sessions, it wasn't coming from Billy, it was coming from 9-year-old David. And he says he remembers all of the abuse, all of the pain. A lot of it happened on a family farm that Chalmers' father had left him. It was like 80 acres or something like that. And he would bring Billy out there and he would abuse him both physically and sexually. He said there was one occasion where he had to dig a grave for himself and get in it, and then essentially he was buried alive, but there was like a piece of piping that Chalmers let him like breathe through, and Chalmers would then go to the bathroom down this pipe that Billy was using to breathe from. What the fuck is wrong with people? Like, just horrible to think about. And this just continued and got worse and worse until the boys were finally old enough and strong enough to fight back. I guess it all happened one night when Billy was being abused and his brother had just had enough, so he went up behind their, I don't even want to call him their stepfather, Chalmers, and he had a knife with him and he just held it to his throat and he was like, get out of the house, and he left. In terms of like a social life for Billy, there really wasn't one. He grew up playing primarily with his sister Kathy. I guess they were very close, and she said that they had a lot of fun together. But he didn't really like playing with other kids in the neighborhood or even at school. He just liked to keep to himself, and specifically anything with like large groups, like it just wasn't his jam. So when he's 17, it's 1972, and it's, you know, the 70s. Sex, drugs, rock and roll. And it's also the year that Billy is arrested for the first time. I guess he and a friend had picked up some females and they were driving around drinking and smoking pot. Billy and his friends said that they dropped the women off, but a few days after they were together, the women go to the police and they accuse them of raping them. Billy and his friend deny it, and that they said it was just misunderstanding and that these women were actually sex workers, and that when Billy couldn't perform, they decided not to pay them, and then the girls were upset. A judge did not believe Billy and his friends. They did believe these women and their version of the story, so they were found guilty and both sentenced to serve 6 months at a youth camp. And this was kind of the start of just like a series of arrests from there. Not long after he was released, he was arrested again for a series of armed robberies that took place. It sounds like it was out in this like field where men used to go and have like secret hidden rendezvous with other men, and then they didn't want anybody to know about them. So Billy would go out there and he would like beat these men up and then threaten to tell about like what they were doing and steal all their money. So he's arrested for assault one time for doing that. Then in 1975, he's arrested for robbing a pharmacy to get pharmaceuticals. In that case, his lawyer was able to work out a plea bargain, and so he was only sentenced to serve 2 years in prison. So he does his 2 years. He's released when he's 23 years old, and that's when, not long after getting released for that incident, he quickly reoffends with the campus assaults. When the alters are asked to talk about these situations, the first one that they want to speak with is Reagan, because he's the one that's known as like the aggressor, so they think that he's responsible. And he is very adamant that he is a thief and that he definitely planned robberies, but he's in no way a rapist. At one point, Tommy comes forward and he starts talking about one of the alters named Adelina and says that she has information about what happened because she's the one that's responsible. So they're able to talk to Adelina, and she's described as almost remorseful. She immediately starts saying that everything that happened is her fault. She's ruined the other boys. When she says boys, she's referring to the other alters. She's ruined their lives. She's ruined her life. She's ruined these girls' lives who are the victims of what she did. And her only explanation for carrying out these assaults was that she craved warmth and touch and love, and that nobody was understanding like what that meant. I mean, I don't think going about it the way that you went about it was also really understanding the assignment. So now that they know which alter is responsible for the crimes, they want to get to the point where they can prepare Billy to almost have some form of control over what's going on. They say they want to use a technique called fusion, where they kind of merge the entities together. I guess this was quite a controversial decision because some of the doctors didn't feel like it was actually in Billy's best interest, because if they fused alters together, the ones that were meant to protect him wouldn't be able to. So they make a plan that the best way to move forward will be to, it sounds almost like, fuse the alters together in pairs that would like best complement each other. Doing this takes several months. There was lots of hurdles to overcome. It ranged from some of the alters not wanting to admit guilt, some of them not wanting to plead insanity, Billy wanting to take his life, the lawyers getting fired from other alters. Like, it was a huge thing. But eventually it got to the point where they felt like they got to a point where enough progress was done where Billy was able to stand trial and be like the one accused. So you can imagine like the public is having a really hard time believing this. Like I said in the beginning, like this was the 70s. It's not even talked about much today, let alone then. And so at trial, everyone heard a lot from Billy's family, and they really wanted to focus on the trauma that he experienced as a child, which obviously is really important. But I can only imagine how much of a struggle it would have been for the victims to be there and hear everything, because they're real people, you know, like something horrible also happened to them. And regardless of somebody's mental health, you know, like there's no excuse for what just happened to them for just like innocently living their lives. And then this trial kind of turned into this like huge spectacle. And then at the end, the outcome was that he was found not guilty by reasons of insanity. So there was really, I guess, probably never really any closure for them. This decision was not supported by a lot of people. Even Billy's own family acknowledged that, yes, he suffered from mental illness, but he was the vehicle that harmed these victims, so there was no excuse, like there had to be a punishment. After his trial, he's not just like released to go back into the public. He was sent to a mental health facility to give him like further treatment, try to help him understand his diagnosis a little bit more. And I guess this was like a minimum security facility. And he was almost treated like, I guess, kind of like a star. He was very recognized by like the staff and the other patients. There were people coming in to interview him to do like book deals and want rights to his movie and his life story. So he really wasn't getting the best care, because then even like his medical team was also being like submerged in this lifestyle where they're also being interviewed. And I don't know, it sounds like it just got like to everybody's head. And all of the freedoms that he had just kind of came to a boiling point where it was decided that he was going to be moved to another facility that was much more like maximum security. But basically what happens here is like it's like the complete opposite. So he went from like having leniency, but to, like still stick with like his medication and some form of structure of care that he was getting before, to now being in this different facility where the doctors there actually didn't really believe in DID, and they diagnosed him as schizophrenic, and they were giving him different medication that wasn't helping him. He feels things just going downhill for him, and he decides to escape from the institution. He had a friend help him. His friend actually got him a social insurance number under the name Christopher Carr. He took him out of state to Colorado, helped get him all set up there, change his name, get IDs, all like the whole thing. And then his friend flies back from Ohio and leaves him there. And then Billy just goes on the run from, I think, like July to November. He's bouncing all throughout the states. He even makes it to Vancouver, BC at one point. And he's keeping in contact with his good friend and his brother. And he says that he's making money usually by painting on the sidewalks or selling some of his art pieces. But there is speculation that he was finding money by much darker means. While he's on the run living as Chris Carr, he makes his way to Bellingham. And not long after he arrives there, a 32-year-old named Michael Madden goes missing in the same apartment complex that Billy moves into. Michael's family reported him missing on September 27th, and when the investigators came to the complex and interviewed the landlady, she said that the last time she saw Michael, he was in a heated discussion with Chris, who was Billy, outside of the apartment on September 15th. Before they get a chance to talk to Billy, he ups and leaves, but the landlady is able to let the investigators into his apartment to do a search. And inside there, they find Michael's checkbook, they find some personal items of his, and they also find some mail with his name on it. They soon realize that Billy had deposited one of Michael's government checks that he was being issued. I believe he was on disability, and so he was getting funding from the government. And while he was away on vacation, I think at the beginning of September, Billy had allegedly taken one of those checks, forged Michael's signature, deposited into his account. And the theory is that when Michael got back and realizes that the check never arrived, there was something that led him to suspect that Chris or Billy was responsible, and he confronted him. This is all speculation though, and without a body or any evidence of a crime scene or a crime taking place, they couldn't do anything about it. I think there is a lot there. At one point, one of Billy's family members had been storing some of his items, and in a fishing tackle box, he found a pair of broken eyeglasses that looked identical to the pair that Michael wore, and they had a speck of blood on them. It'd be really interesting to find out where these are now, or if any of that DNA was kept, because at the time that it was found, the DNA technology, I don't even think was used at that point, so they couldn't test the DNA to see if it was Michael's, and there wasn't enough on it in just a speck to prove that it was a murder. And there's more. It's now come out that another missing man has been linked to Billy. His name was DeJuan Cox, and he went missing in Logan when Billy was also living there. It's been confirmed by his family that Billy did know DeJuan. They used to hang hang out sometimes and smoke pot together. And after Dewan went missing, Billy conveniently had come across a large sum of money. Just like in Michael's case, though, there's just not enough evidence for a charge against Billy as far as Dewan's disappearance, so nothing comes of it either. In November of that year that Billy fled the institution, he finally was caught in Florida when his brother called in a tip to the FBI to let them know that he was there. He did spend a brief amount of time in jail just for fleeing the hospital. Nothing was ever linked in terms of like somebody's disappearance. And when he was released, he actually was hired on in like a 90-day like rehabilitation program with like the police force, where he was like entering computer software to their systems. Later in his life, he did try to stay out of media attention. He bought a farm in Athens. He also started a foundation for abused children. There was one incident where he was living in a town and the sheriff didn't like him and he felt like he was out to get him. The last time he was ever arrested was actually because he verbally threatened to kill this sheriff, but the case was thrown out because the sheriff had recorded like the whole incident or something like that without Billy's knowledge, and the case was dismissed. There is just so much to process when it comes to this case, and I can definitely understand, you know, like where all sides of like the emotions are coming from. I think at the end of the day, like his family has said, you know, his mental illness cannot be an excuse for any crimes that happen. There are real victims here that felt like their pain was almost like cast aside to make room for the person who was responsible to almost like take on a victim role instead of them. I definitely went back and forth with my thoughts. I don't think that he was lying about having DID. As I learned more about it and saw other people interviewed, I felt like I saw like the same traits between Billy and those people, like in terms of when different alters would come forward. However, what I've learned is that it's extremely rare for someone with DID to be dangerous. I think that I read that not even one female has ever been accused of a dangerous crime that's been diagnosed with DID. And even men who are diagnosed with it, like the percentage of them being involved in any crime is like extremely low. So the stigma behind DID being dangerous or that you should, you know, fear somebody who has it is very unfounded. So in Billy's case, what I felt was that as things kind of came out later, it made me feel like although I do feel like he had DID, he almost used it as like an excuse as time went on, and he was much more aware of things that were happening than he let on. Prime example is that he allegedly confessed to a girlfriend of his named Tracy that he killed Michael and Dewan and that he would get away with it because he had already gotten away with crimes in the past. So I'm not too sure. There are definitely a lot of unanswered questions. I really want to get to the bottom of Michael and Dewan's disappearance. Like, that needs to be solved. So I'm really hoping for like a Josh Mankiewicz collaboration on this one. We won't be able to get any answers from Billy though. In 2012, he was diagnosed with cancer and moved into his sister's house. Here he also made a confession to his niece as he was dying. He asked if God was able to forgive people for doing horrible things, which she said, yes, he'll forgive anybody. And he said, do you think he could forgive me for murdering people? From what I know, he never gave names or specifics to her, and there's never been like a formal confession or anything like that from him, nor will there ever be, because on December 12th, he passed away. I feel like that's pretty powerful though. You know, like usually deathbed confessions are like pretty solid. You don't want to just like put something out there if it's not true, like right before you're about to die. I don't know. I want to know your guys' thoughts. All right, that is it for me today, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It means the world to me. I love and I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much again to Cerebral for sponsoring today's video. Make sure you check out that link in my description for your first month for $30. And the answer to today's riddle, I'll remind you of the riddle. I was carried into a dark room and set on fire. I wept, and then my head was cut off. What am I? The answer is a candle. I cannot wait to hear your guys' answers in the comments below. I've been watching a lot of my girl Megan over at Megan True Crime. She always says below, and then now like apparently I'm starting to talk to her. Sorry, Megan. Love you. All right, I will see you in the next video. I will miss you terribly. Until then, make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon.